Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a prophylactic Charles Coulombe.
Prophylactic? What am I like? Am I a vaccination against corona? Is this what we're saying? Or am I a prophylactic? There are all sorts of things I could be.
Well, this was inspired by a mutual friend, Robert Thomas, who because last week I said prophetic. And
yeah, I remember that.
Robert Thomas commented, prophetic and prophylactic is what Jeeves Wooster would say on this occasion.
Okay, well, I suppose that to the degree that you're Mr. Wooster and I'm Jeeves, I am the paid employee.
Yeah, when Robert Thomas said this, it occurred to me that you and I have a Jeeves and Wooster relationship. You're the hired help. You're intelligent. You always, straighten things up and give good advice. And I don't know. How would you describe Jeeves Wooster?
Affable, mentally negligible, but affable.
There you go. Okay. Yeah.
So would you consider yourself mentally negligible and affable?
I mean, relatively. I'm fine with that.
So have I ever pulled your chestnuts out of the fire?
Yeah. I would say so.
Well, not that much, really. I mean, there was that unpleasant affair with the would-be strikers.
Right.
So we did settle that. There was the big fight over the change of automobiles for the motor pool. I remember that.
Yeah. Give yourself some credit, Charles.
There was we did avoid the walkout of the secretarial pool. Well, yes, but you see, this is all you can put down to a knowledge of human nature. And also the fact that, well, I've been around the Franchinis a long time, and I have their interests at heart.
Thank you, Charles. We appreciate that.
Now, your Uncle Giovanni did. He, well, never mind. But it's funny. He used to say to me, kid, you could have been a real great consigliere for this family. I'll never forget that. And I knew he meant it as a compliment.
Of course. That's a huge compliment.
I thought so. He always called your dad the nice one.
Yeah. Which he was.
Yeah, he was. He was the nice one of the four brothers. Giovanni was, well, I don't want to say he wasn't.
He was gentle yet firm.
That's the way to put it. Cruel but fair. No, poor man. I mean, well, as he put it once to me, none of my boys ever burned. Anyway, that's enough in-house chatter.
Yeah. What's new, Charles?
What is new? Well, I'll tell you what's new. The March of the Marching Morons continue their progress across the land. From the Tower of the United Nations building in Manhattan to the Two River Theater in Red Bank, New Jersey. The stupidity continues. The Secretary General of the UN tweeted that the COVID virus is so horrible because of millennia of patriarchy. I think the man's on drugs or is drunk or something. And then at Red Bank, New Jersey, the fabulous Two River Theater canceled a performance of the 1939 play, which I happen to be very fond of, both as a play and as a 1940 movie with Lionel Barrymore and Sir Cedric Hardwicke, his death, called On Borrowed Time. It is one of the most touching, warm-hearted, magical things you have ever seen, either as a movie or a play. And it was canceled because there are representational issues. And the theater are going to hire some company of professional political commissars to get their minds right. And they're going to hire a facilitator to lead some sort of public meetings on this. This kind of self-censorship is the death of theater. The absolute death. And you know, the other thing that drives me nuts about this, it is a commonplace in theater and in film in this country. Well, in that country, the United States. I'm not in the States right now, but in the States, it's a commonplace to inveigh and rail against the blacklist of the 50s. Oh, McCarthyism, naming names. It was so terrible. Oh, how it attacked artistic freedom. Ooh. Yeah. And so many people in the entertainment industry today fantasize about how they would have stood up before the committee and refused to name names. Oh, shut up. If this kind of thing is any indication, you little mice, you do as you were told and like it. The attempt to search out and destroy white supremacy or whiteness or whatever the mind twerkers are dishing out this week. It's the McCarthyism of the left. They are totalitarians and utter hypocrites. I have never in my life seen a more ridiculous performance than what's going on with this kind of drivel. We haven't been sufficiently sensitive. All right, chipmunks, listen good. I am a Catholic and I'm of French descent. You don't think I haven't spent my whole life hearing both my ethnicity and my religion constantly attacked, made fun of, abused? Of course I have. And the fact of the matter is, my little darlings, my sweetest little munchkins, my lovies, that's just the way human life is. What you want to do is replace that with a whole new set of oppression cooked up by your own, I don't know what organ you pull it out of. Well, no. I don't care if it's the Smithsonian Institution or the United Nations or the American Fellowship of Learned Societies or any of these ridiculous groups. The Ivy League and the Seven Sisters, all of whose universities are blathering at the mouth about the same drivel. No. You don't get to be that stupid, to quote an employer of mine. You don't have that right to be that stupid in the positions you're in. There, and a lot of the moronic stuff they're putting out talk about the need for a reckoning with the country's history. Well, the problem, my little Mersey-dotes, is that there'll be a reckoning, all right, but you'll be on the wrong side of it, and you won't like it when the time comes. You see, in a society such as ours, the only way you can function is by a great deal of humor and brushing off a lot of offense. It's just the way it is. Could you imagine if I took offense every time Catholicism was ridiculed or the French were attacked? I'd spend all my time blowing up at people. I'd say, listen here, moron. Now, what kind of a life would that be? With all of us doing that, how could you have any kind of a society at all? Because everyone's got a chip on their shoulder. But see, here's the other half of it. Yes, everyone's been outraged, and it's so awful for all of us. But also everyone has been the outragers. It was blacks that sold the blacks to the slavers. You don't go running around hearing people demanding reparations from the nations of Black Africa. You don't hear that at all. And for that matter, you don't hear the Southerners yapping about the need for reparations for Reconstruction. It's all such garbage. This is the problem with this whole insanity. But it comes from the fact that the country having become entirely irreligious, we have no principles at all. We stand for nothing. And so we're reduced to various packs of wild dogs. But there's only two things you can do in that circumstance, ladies and gentlemen. One, be as devout as you can. And two, try not to be crazy. And try not to be stupid. And try to forgive. That's the worst of it, you see, because the people who are riding high now, well, I'll put it to you this way. Just as over the past few years, I found myself first defending Confederate monuments, and then Columbus monuments, and Father Sarah monuments, and finally all things, etc. I suspect that if I live to be 70, I'll find myself defending civil rights monuments. I have every suspicion that that is what will happen.
MLK? Really?
Yeah, because the stupidity is getting so bad, the blowback will be extremely vicious, and the shoe will be on the other foot. The problem is, you see, you can't really run a country with the methods of the people that are trying to. You can't destroy the police, and you can't rip apart the armed forces. You can't rip apart civic tolerance the way they're doing and function. It's just not possible. I mean, the communists in 1917 were smart enough to take over the state apparatus and use it. These people are destroying it before our very eyes. These aren't smart revolutionaries. They're stupid. And that goes to the ones in power already. And there will be a backlash. It'll be very unpleasant. That is my firm suspicion. And when that time comes, as I say, I'll find myself defending civil rights monuments.
This reminds me of a James Woods. Is it James Wood or James Woods? The actor.
Woods.
It reminds me. Obama, the gift from hell that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
And
can't argue with that.
It's hard to imagine an MLK statue being taken down. So you're talking about conservative mobs.
Yeah. Well, they'll be called conservative mobs anyway. Right wing, whatever you want to call them. Imagine the Boogaloo Boys or the Proud Boys as a popular movement. Because there are a lot more people who aren't so crazy than there are. And it's the so crazies that give us Antifa. It's the not so crazies that give us the others. But the problem is that times like this bring out the worst in us. I mean, when San Gabriel Mission burned, honestly, if I thought I had the person who had done it in my grasp, I'd have killed him. That's how outraged I was. Now, mind you, I wouldn't have felt very good about it later. But as any one of a number of mob folk have said, we weren't thinking about later. That's always the problem with a mob, regardless of its supposed ideology. They don't think. Mobs do. They don't think. And that's true regardless of their quote-unquote conservative or quote-unquote liberal. And so, as I say, I think that if it'll happen sooner, if Harris is elected president, and it'll be put off by at least 4 years if the Trumpster wins.
How is it that Harris lost the primary and Biden won, and yet no one's interested in Biden and all the energy is around Harris?
Well, because everyone presumes that Biden won't. Well, number one, he's a white male, and number two, everyone presumes that he'll die in office, and at the very least, be a cipher.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So why didn't he just lose the primary?
Because people knew what Harris was like, and they didn't like her.
But now they like her.
Now they like her. Just like during the primary campaign, she attacked Biden for his sexual record, and now it's not a problem. I mean, basically, he was a sexual predator when he was her opponent, and now he's not. That they're allies.
Primaries are ridiculous. I remember the primary for Republicans 4 years ago very, very well. Everybody's at each other's throats. Ted Cruz, Trump, Rubio, and now for the list of Supreme Court candidates that Trump put forward, he put Cruz and Rubio in there. Everybody's buddy, and nothing anybody said actually mattered.
And nothing, it's true. It's true. The primaries, everybody's vicious to each other, but then they have to pull together for the sake of party unity.
Ben Carson was, I think, a prominent medical role, even though, like, Trump viciously went after him. It's funny. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's all, to some degree, it's all kind of phony. Not that that's a bad thing. Not that that's a bad thing, because, it's a free republic, and at least we vote.
Yeah, it is always striking, because it seems like all the words from politicians don't actually mean anything, and it's like, we talked about this before. I don't think we said it on the show. It's like that cartoon. Oh, no, maybe I was talking about it with my brother. It's like this cartoon, Looney Tunes cartoon, where the dog and cat check in, and they hit the times card and they clock in, and then they start fighting.
Yeah.
And because that's what you do when you clock in, but then they punch that time card again, and they're friends.
Yeah, off they go. Well, I mean, see, this is. Marx had it wrong. Politics is the opiate of the masses.
Yeah.
So, anyway, well, do we have any meaningful production?
Yeah.
Is it meaningful?
Yeah. Yes, we have some memes of production time. Nationalize
the memes of production
for the common good. All right. Let's see. Just a couple comments from someone. So apparently Oswald Dupree watches our YouTube videos.
Of course he does.
He says, I think Charles is just jealous of my sales.
Jealous of yours? I'm not jealous of his what? His get-rich-quick book? How I Can Scam You 12 Ways to a Pyramid Scheme? I'm not jealous of that. It's garbage. I'm not jealous of that at all. I'm not resentful.
We've talked about this before many episodes ago. Why should pyramid schemes be illegal?
They are illegal. That's all you need to know.
I mean, if everything is laid out and everything is disclosed, and you sign up and you pay a fee, and then you refer people and you get a commission, and it's increasingly as you go down the pyramid, and everything, it penalizes the Johnny-come-latelys.
Oh, gosh, of course it does.
What?
Listen, Dupree has been peddling this garbage for as long as I can remember. He's always been trying to hone in on my action, but I'm going to tell you something. He's only a year younger than I am. So you know what? Well, what's his second thing? You said he's got to say, what's his second thing?
Yeah, okay. So This is in relation to a video. We released the mini segment, The Legend of El Cantunya, the man who tricked the
Yeah,
devil, right?
yeah.
And so Oswald opined on that. The devil also makes deals with authors. Not that I would know.
Well, of course you wouldn't, because you can't call the tripe you put out books. I mean, I don't know what you'd call them, hopped up pamphlets or something. All right, I'll tell you what. He's only a year younger than me, so guess what? I'm going to pull the nuclear option.
Uh-oh.
Oswald, this is for you, baby. Okay, boomer.
Hmm.
Yeah, I said it. And just so you'll know, Mr. The 70s never died, I dressed the way my father, my grandfather's father dressed. You look like a reject from Saturday Night Live. Yeah, you heard it here first. I'm sorry to break the news. Saturday Night Live, what am I thinking? Saturday Night Fever.
Right.
That's what you're a reject from. The 70s were the decade that never should have happened, and they are, I tell you, they're when you peaked and when you fell. And you know what, Oswald? I don't know why you even bother. Stay in Denmark, just, do your blacksmithing or whatever it is you're into, and leave decent people alone. That's my advice to Oswald Dupree.
All right.
Oh, and let me tell you something. Do you think your Uncle Giovanni would have ever trusted him with the tasks he gave me? No. Because he knew what kind of a four-flusher Oswald was, even when we were kids. He could always trust me to make the collections and bring every penny back. He couldn't trust Oswald to do that.
Oh.
So you just remember that. Your Uncle Giovanni was not a poor judge of character.
I think
You can say other things about him, but you can't say that.
Okay. Fair enough, Charles. Fair enough.
You don't believe me? Ask your ma.
Okay, a couple announcements. First is Tan Books has announced that the Blessed Charles books are on the way. We're going to receive them on Wednesday. So for everyone who's already pre-ordered, we should be shipping them out this week, probably Thursday or Friday.
Yeah.
And yeah, so if you've been waiting to pull the trigger on buying the book, this week's a good time because we'll finally be able to ship it. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to read the rest of the book. Let's see.
How far have you gotten with it?
I asked for a review copy. I asked for a review copy from no. I asked for a review copy from the editor of Tan Books, and I haven't gotten it yet. So because I've gotten a digital copy from you, but I don't like reading on the computer. I want I want to sit on a comfortable chair and read a book and get all cozy. And that's why I haven't continued to read it, because I felt it was so good. It wasn't befitting just reading it on the computer.
Wow, I am being buttered up. This is good. How far had you gotten when you were overcome?
The first chapter, where you're laying out the history of the line of kings, I guess you could say, and the Habsburgs and the world that Blessed Charles came from. You're trying to orient people to this world and secretly convert them to become monarchists.
I am not trying.
That's your story, but to me, I feel that the first chapter is very strategic.
Well, yeah, because it tells you what kind of a man he was and what his background was. You need to know that if you're going to understand anyone. I mean, if I were going to write an autobiography, I would have to put out a lot of stuff from the theater in New York in the early 60s to Hollywood in the late 60s to Roswell, New Mexico in the early 80s. Well, yeah. So, the late 70s, actually. I was just thinking today of the Furs Cafeteria in Roswell.
The first cafeteria?
not First, Furs, Furrs, Furs.
Oh, okay.
It's a cafeteria chain. They used to have one in Roswell, and they had a pianist. It was a very elegant cafeteria. And so the Rotary Club would meet there, and the Kiwanis and people like that. But you had this elderly lady who was a pianist. She'd always be there in the center of the room, smiling at everyone and playing away.
Okay.
There's not much more to that memory than that.
Okay.
I enjoyed eating at the Furs Cafeteria in Roswell, New Mexico. I don't know what I can add to that.
That's fine, Charles. That's fine. Okay.
Now, that wasn't the most elegant restaurant in Roswell in those days.
Okay.
They had several really good ones. The best in terms of Western cooking, I say Western because they actually had one of the best Chinese restaurants I was ever at my entire life, Chu Den. Without a doubt, it was. Oh, the food was so good, and the wonton soup was incredible. Because Mr. Chu would have fresh ingredients flown in once a week from Taiwan. The food was amazing at Chu Den. But in terms of Western style food, there were two other places, well, three. The most elegant was called the Carnegie Library Restaurant, because the old Carnegie Library, when it moved to the new library, they sold the building. And a couple took it over and turned it into a very, very fine dining restaurant. It was really neat. I loved eating there. The Cattleman's Steakhouse, that was another big one, which, again, was just what it sounds like. And then across the street from the Institute was the Claim, where often we would go for my lunch, steaks, that kind of thing. And then, of course, there was the Roswell Country Club, which I would go to from time to time because the couple that sponsored me in town were members, and they had a very fine dining room. So now you know more about better dining possibilities in Roswell, New Mexico between 1978 and 1980 than the vast majority of people who've never been there.
You did a seamless transition from monarchy and the Habsburgs to fine cuisine in the 70s and 80s in New Mexico.
Well, just in Roswell. I mean, I could talk about Santa Fe and Albuquerque if you'd like, but
no, I'm just noting that. Wow.
Well, you know, the other thing that was interesting was that at the Albuquerque airport in those days, they had, it's quite true, they had a Hawaiian-style restaurant in the airport, and you could get these huge bowls of saimin. It was so good.
Excellent. Okay, shameless promotion. Become a patron for as low as $5 a month. Get 30 hours extra content. Get your questions asked. Get early access. All this for as low as $5 a month. A lot of people sending questions in who aren't patrons. Right now, we're mostly asking questions only from patrons because we're getting so many right now. So, if you really want your question asked, become a patron.
All right. We may do another extra question session at some point, I guess.
Yeah, we do. We do it. So far, we've been doing it twice a year. But if we get that patron fund a little bit higher, we'll be doing it quarterly. So, time for the questions. First question.
Oh boy.
First question is from Patty.
Hello, Patty.
Charles, a female friend of mine, is very into something called the Mary-like Modesty Crusade. As far as I can tell, it is based off a pamphlet from the 1950s extrapolating upon a 1928 decree given by one of the Roman congregations. Do you know anything about this movement? Agree that dress and decorum are in a terrible state nowadays, but some of her positions, for example, women can't wear pants, t-shirts are bad, etc., strike me as a bit extreme.
I'm only slightly familiar with it, but I'm certainly familiar with the concept. I'm going to say some terrible things, though, and people are going to hate me.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that slacks and a t-shirt on a woman are evil, but they certainly do not put her in her best light. They're not flattering. And I'm so old, I kind of like it when chicks look like chicks. It's true. You know, I have seen the masculinization of women proceed my whole life. Then I've seen the feminization of men as well, just so you know, you don't think it's one way. There's nothing more wonderful than a really feminine woman. The dress, the skirt, the flowing movement. Women used to walk, you know, in a very particular way. They moved their hips. I mean, they glided, and that was how their mothers taught them to walk. Now they trudge along like guys, and the only people you'll see sometimes walking the way women walked are drag queens, and they do it in a very exaggerated manner. So you know, so much in life, and people are funny. We tend to make rules out of things that should simply be natural. You know, it is not evil to eat wood chips at dinner, but I really wouldn't recommend it. And it shouldn't have to be a law. No wood chips eaten at dinner. You just should know you don't do that. But there's a lot of that kind of thing we've lost. Today, men have no respect for women. Women have no respect for men. That's a great oversimplification, but it's not entirely untrue. You know, I'm so old. I can remember the first time I met a friend in elementary school whose mother worked. Nobody's mothers worked. This was amazing. And I thought, well, I asked, well, how could she possibly make dinner? Oh, she doesn't. We always order out. One of the ways I've been amusing myself during the lockdown was watching old Bewitched episodes, which are very funny and enjoyable, but I'd forgotten how much they reflect the mores of that time. And I remember, you know, with my mom, as with most people's mothers, the big thing was to stop dinner. So to answer your question, Patty, I wouldn't say that slacks are evil, but I would say that they're kind of unbecoming. You know, it's kind of like with wearing clothes to church. On the one hand, I'm very much against priests denouncing people from the pulpit for not being properly dressed at Mass. But by the same token, I do think maybe once a quarter or something, there should be a sermon on dress at Mass, simply to say, how do you dress when you think something's important? Nobody has to tell you to dress well to go to a job interview. No one would have to tell you to dress well to go to the presidential inauguration. Nobody would have to tell you. Just, oh yeah, that's what you do. This is the kind of naturalness that we've lost, the kind of sense of fittingness that's gone. So, you know, the other thing too, we were discussing this earlier. One of the pitfalls of living in a warm climate is when summer comes along, everybody dresses skimpy. Now, that's not so bad, maybe, if you've got a very beautiful form to display. But now I've got to let you all in on a secret. Most of us don't know it's true. And if you aren't a Michelangelo statue, less really is more. And if you are a Michelangelo statue, your clothes will look all the better on you. It's like formal wear. There isn't a man born who doesn't look good in white tie. But if he's thin and well built, he looks really good. But even if he's fat and pot-bellied like me, and he still looks at least presentable. And the same is true with women. You put a shall we say a larger than normal or than usual girl into a floral muumuu. If nothing else, she looks picturesque. You pour the same girl into spandex, and she looks grotesque. And if she accompanies it with tattoos, oh man, oh man, oh Manischewitz. I know. I'm sexist. I'm racist. I'm speciesist. I'm ageist. I know. But that's the advice I have for that.
Couple comments on that. One, I think a lot of your commentary was fueled by what we just talked about, my admission, because
yeah. Well, you can share with the audience. We're friends here.
Yeah, my life has changed dramatically. My mom's disabled and my dad, passed away this year. So I've been doing all the shopping at grocery markets this past year, and so that sort of provides a broad survey of local community that I've never had before. And I was just so utterly sick of sort of the imagery which Charles just provided. That I vowed to really dress up when I go to the market, just kind of as another, screw you to everybody, because I'm just so sick of it, where just puts a knot in your stomach, all this stuff, and I'm just not gonna have it anymore. So yeah.
The other thing is, you take the same chick who's a bit overweight and tattooed, you put her into a becoming dress. It covers a multitude of sins, number one, and number two, it actually gives her something.
Yeah, it does. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning, at church, we have a miracle cure-all for this stuff at church. You know what the miracle cure-all is? It's called a veil.
Ah, yes.
And this is a miracle cure-all because t-shirt and jeans, a little awkward with a veil. When you sort of mandate a veil, it's like, well, this...
You will see, I gotta tell you, you will see the t-shirt, jeans, and veil look in some places.
I haven't seen that.
You're not missing anything.
But you've got to figure that the girl must at least feel awkward, like, this doesn't match. Like,
I would think so.
Yeah. So I haven't seen it. I'm grateful for not having seen it, and I think the veil is the cure-all for modesty in church. Okay. Which part of this is inspired by your epic line in Vicars of Christ, where I think it was the second pope, I forgot which one, but there was instituted the veil. One of the very, very early on. Yeah, and you said, and that continued throughout church history, the entirety of church history until the 1960s.
Yeah.
I just love the way you state that. Like, it's so... I don't know. It was just kind of you putting the knife in.
Well, that in the 1960s, everybody became perfect. And we became wonderful. And we became so marvelous the way we are now. I mean, so much of what we're going through today are the senile dreams of the 60s survivors in power, in church and state. The old age homes have vomited forth elderly hippies in power. And they're just living it up, living the high life, remaking the world to their dreams. There had been a bit of a reaction. in the 70s, and particularly in the 80s and into the 90s. But now they're in complete charge. The World War II people are dead, and they rule.
I've been wondering about that recently. What do you think will be the senile dreams of Generation X? And what do you think will be the senile dreams of the millennials?
Oh, I can't even begin to imagine. I'm frightened even thinking it.
Do you think it'll be worse than the boomers, though?
No.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was thinking, too, and hoping.
No, I don't think it'll be worse. I mean, so you got to understand, they took a lot of really great stuff and destroyed it, and are continuing to destroy.
Yeah.
You guys were basically handed a pile of wreckage and said, here. And there's just, you can never equal what they did, no matter what you do.
They say that the millennials are the biggest pro-life generation right now.
Well, that may well be, if only because those of them who are, alive are those who weren't murdered. And I think on a certain level, they're aware that they're all survivors.
That's very true.
Yeah. I mean,
I've said my story where the doctor recommended aborting me because my mom was 40-something, I think.
She sure was. You were a surprise.
Yeah.
And a pleasant one.
So I'm the one that got away. I'm one of the ones.
Well, indeed. Like my two youngest, my youngest nephew and niece are the same way. They, in fact, the youngest boy is the penultimate child.
Is that Jack?
Jack, yeah.
Yeah.
And we didn't know this until Claire was coming along. We didn't know why my sister-in-law had fired her doctor. But the reason is because when Jack was conceived, he advised an abortion because of her age. And sure, basic attitude was, all right, there'll be an abortion. Your services. Bye-bye.
Oh, wow.
Well, she wasn't happy, but she didn't tell us. She was so angry, and she kept it inside. And she only told us when she was pregnant with Claire, why she'd gotten rid of Dr. Moron.
Yeah, I haven't gone through this yet, but from what I hear from my sister-in-law and sister, it seems like there's like an abortion salesman where their job is to scare you into an abortion. Like, there's all these risks, it's 3% Down syndrome chance, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, there's the risk that if I hear any more, I could go crazy and blow a bullet hole through your brain. Yeah, I know what you mean, doctor. And it's the same, too. They're always pushing you to off the elderly relative. You get it on both ends. I'll tell you what, doctor, let's try your recommendations on you. What do you say? I remember when they were pushing us to let my mother starve to death. The doctors yapping at me say, well, it's about her quality of life. And I looked at this little piece of garbage with the doctorate, and I said, Doctor, my mother tells me that she's not bored. I don't know how that's possible, but that's what she says. She has her family in every day. She gets sung to every day. Now let's look at you, shall we? How many hours a day do you work? 18? 20 perhaps? I'll bet you've lost a girlfriend or maybe even a wife over your lifestyle, haven't you? You don't have much of a life, doctor. So I would say that my mother's quality of life is much higher than yours. Should we kill you? He didn't want to continue the conversation for some reason.
You're being hostile.
No, I'm being accepting. If you're going to say quality of life is the compass by which we decide who lives and dies, then I would say most doctors in most hospitals should be eliminated because their quality of life stinks, especially the medical students. the interns and so on. Their lives are terrible, so they should all be killed.
Right.
Well, I mean, if I believed them, that's what I. Fortunately, I don't.
Right, according to their standards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. A couple questions from Zane. May Charles.
Well, that's kind of zany.
All right. May Charles share his thoughts on the state of the Catholic Church in early America. I have read in my college textbooks that the common perception of the Church, especially of the hierarchy among Italian and Polish Catholics, was that the Church was dominated by the Irish and that the hierarchy only served the interests of Irish Catholics. Is there any truth to this? And if there is, why was the Church in America so dominated by the Irish?
Well, in a word, yes. It was. The Irish ran the church. They were the primary holders of power, and they got into fights from time to time with Germans and the Poles and the Italians and the French Canadians and the Ruthenians. One of the prize in that collection was Archbishop Ireland of St. Paul, Minnesota, who was responsible for not one but two schisms, the Polish National Catholics and the Ruthenian Carpatho-Russian Orthodox Catholic Church. So why were the Irish in charge? Well, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, they came sooner. Most of the Italians didn't get here until after 1870. The Poles started coming in big numbers even after that. The French Canadians started coming down in big numbers after the Civil War, whereas the Irish started flooding in with the potato famine in 1847. Now, not only did they get here first, they spoke the language. For the most part, they lost their native tongue in Ireland. So, very simple, really. And they were much more respectful of the local establishment than the quote-unquote foreign Catholics could ever be in their first couple of generations.
Okay. You really tempered your bias against your bias against the Irish.
I'm not biased against the Irish. I accept them for who and what they are. I have a lot of Irish blood myself, you know, and self-hatred is not one of my favorite things.
The Kennedys have made you jaded against the Irish peoples.
Yeah, well, I'll be less so if the Irish reject them. When the Irish will finally come clean, when the Irish Americans will say the Kennedys were scum, I mean, I have no problem saying that about French Canadian politicians. I don't see why it should be such a problem for them to admit what the Kennedys were. I mean, the current crop of politicians in Quebec are a bunch of worthless scumbags. I've said it. All right, now matching funds. Let's have the Irish tell us the Kennedys were scum. That's all they have to do, and, you know, we'll be fine. And, of course, all Catholic politicians of whatever ethnicity have to free themselves from Kennedy's dictum that, you know, he'd never allow the church to affect his public life. The moron who's the premier of Victoria, Australia right now, I think his name is Dean Adams or Jerry Adams or something. Not Jerry Adams, that's the pro-abortion Sinn Féin guy in Ireland. Anyway, Neil Adams, I think, is the man in Victoria, very draconian on the corona. I mean, people are getting arrested right and left in Melbourne right now.
For what?
For violating the corona bans.
What does that mean? Going outside? Like, what does that mean?
Going outside, hugging your kid, you know, various illegal activities. So, but that's good, really, because before this happened, he was the epitome of the pro-abort Catholic politician, of the Kennedy Catholic politician. And to find out that he's not just Kennedy, but also Stalin, is kind of liberating, I think. It's tough on my friends in Melbourne, I've got to admit. But it's good that Mr. Adams, the Queen's First Minister for Victoria, is shown up to be the worthless person that he is. I just thought I'd put that out there. And while I mentioned Gerry Adams, that's the other thing that I find very amusing. I wish the Irish would do something about this. Quite apart from the majority of the people of Ireland voting in abortion and gay marriage, which still sticks in my craw, the one part of Ireland that rejected abortion was Northern Ireland. They refused to take it, due primarily to the Ulster Scots. So what happens? During the big furor over Bojo's trying to prorogue Parliament, there's this paralysis that sets in. The one thing that Parliament were able to do was force Northern Ireland to accept abortion. And Gerry Adams and Sinn Féin, the great Irish nationalists, supported this move by the British Parliament. Anti-Irish bias? No. Annoyance at what they've become? Oh, yeah. But I'm annoyed at what my own people have become. You know, the worthless scumbag Premier of Quebec, one of the things he promised was that the crucifix would not be taken out from over the Speaker's chair in the Quebec Parliament. He campaigned on that, and then he did it. What did you say earlier about politicians? Their words mean nothing? No, their words don't mean anything. So, it's not just the Irish.
Right? Zane also says, I'm curious, what does Charles think of the Irish revolutionary Michael Collins? From what I know of him, he was an excellent military leader and fairly devout Catholic. Is he someone to look up to?
I think so, on the whole, yeah. I like Michael Collins. I don't care much for De Valera, but I do like Michael Collins.
Okay. Question from John. Hello, gentlemen. What do the two of you think of the modern prepping movement? That is, anticipating and preparing materially for some sort of catastrophic event that changes the modern technological world as we know it. Is there any historical precedent for prepping? Is there a prepper culture in Europe, like there is in America? Finally, does prepping possibly contradict Christ's counsel to not worry about tomorrow and depend on divine providence, or is it simply prudent to do in the face of local and global instability?
Wow. Well, I was preppy when preppy wasn't cool. And I'm always like, what?
Oh, okay. No, different type.
Different? What do you mean different type?
Like prepping as in preparing for the worst, not like, I don't know.
Prep school.
Yeah.
Preppy comes from prep school. But by the way, if you've ever been to a prep school, you wouldn't call it that. They're called boarding schools.
Okay. I don't care about that.
You don't care about that.
Boarding schools. I thought you were prep schools.
Yeah. Boarding schools. Listen, boarding schools have been a very formative experience for a lot of us. So there.
Okay.
Well, it affects your whole outlook on life.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Are you going to answer the question or what?
Yeah, I'm going to answer the question, but I just feel that you're being antagonistic to the whole preppy class.
So what if I am?
Well, you're dehumanizing them. You're marginalizing them.
Dehumanizing them?
Yes.
That's a bit much, don't you think?
No, you're saying their experiences, their stories don't matter.
I didn't say that. You're actually putting words in my mouth. I said I don't care.
Oh. Well, and you're saying you don't care means they're not worth caring about.
No, I was speaking subjectively. You're saying I'm speaking objectively, which actually isn't true. That's a lie. You're going to have to go to confession. You're trying to make me look bad with malintent.
I am not trying to make you look bad. You've done well enough without my assistance. And even as we speak, all across America, graduates of boarding schools who are watching this program right now, they may come from Groton, they may come from St. Paul's, maybe the Governor Dummer Academy, maybe Kent School, any number of them, St. Andrews. They're right now, St. Paul's in New Hampshire, right now, they're watching this program, and they're being hurt.
Hurt or heard?
Hurt. I can't claim to speak for them, but I can tell you that, well, you've definitely hurt a lot of people today.
You are speaking for them when you say that. You are claiming to speak for them.
Well,
Who elected you?
No one. No one. And I certainly couldn't consider myself a member of that particular class. But I nevertheless feel the need to stand up for them.
Fantastic. You're a champion of the boarding school peoples.
That's right. We're boarding school folk. You are not being canceled. And this program goes on the record supporting you. Who you are, where you are, as you are.
What if they're heretics?
Well, I mean, we don't support that part.
All right.
And you know, after all, most of those schools are, but not all. I mean, Portsmouth Abbey is a boarding school, and they're Catholic.
Okay.
Bobby Kennedy went there, so you know they must be good.
All right.
Anyway, let's move along, shall we?
Yeah.
We spent too much time on this foolishness.
Yes.
Let's get on to prepping.
Yes.
I don't know why you brought up the whole preppy thing anyway.
That was you.
Well, somebody brought it up, and as far as I'm concerned, it was a useless sidelining into nothing in particular.
Agreed.
All right, let's move on. Prepping. He doesn't say which school, does he? No, I know what he's talking about. I'm not that senile. I'm getting there rapidly. No, look, you've always got to be prudent. I mean, in Southern California, we live in earthquake country. Well, you do anyway. I'm not there. But you know that most people keep a bit of extra water and a bit of extra food by in case there's an earthquake. You know, do you really have to get into survivalism like the people in the first Tremors? Well, it turned out all right for them as it happened. But no, I mean, a certain amount of prudent preparation for difficulties is always wise. But you have to balance out against other things. I mean, does it become an obsession? Does it keep you from doing other good you should be doing in the immediate? Prudential judgments are very, very difficult because at the end of the day, one has to decide for oneself what is prudent and what is not. I know that if you were living in Seattle or Portland right now, and we're thinking of moving to Kansas or somewhere, that probably would not be an imprudent idea. Not simply because of the difficulties that those cities are engaging in at the moment, but also because there's a great likelihood that they'll follow the Detroit route to urban renewal afterwards.
Hmm.
You know, we have the cities sometimes don't recover from these kinds of things. And if they have leadership if they have a terrible disaster on the one hand and really stupid leadership on the other, that's a double whammy that turns cities into Detroit and Newark. So Well, a lot depends on a lot of things. I mean, I've had a friend of mine ask me which country he thinks that I think he should emigrate to. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that emigrating is necessarily a good plan anyway. You might want to leave California, but maybe not. I mean, it's hard to say. But I don't think there's a question really of sin or virtue involved, just a prudential judgment.
Yeah. See, it seems like a lot of ex-military are preppers. A lot of my young friends were showing me some of these videos, and they're amused at all these fat, bearded ex-military people patrolling their backwoods property with guns. And,
Well, you see, you can laugh, but it is from folk like that that the ranks of the blowback will come.
yeah, yeah,
And, unfortunately, I can't say they'll be wrong. Somebody went after me on the commentaries for one of these shows a few months back. Said that I was, saying that the Boogaloo Boys were as bad as Antifa. So that's not my point. My point is that, number one, what is going on now must inevitably call up a reaction. That's just human nature. The specifics to this time and place are that the people who are doing the calling up, as it were, the summoning of the sleeping giant, really do happen to be stupid. And the reaction that goes after them will be much more effective, I think, than they themselves are. They don't realize it.
You know, what you said just got me thinking. So much of the world, in order to make people move, they have to be. It's over emotion. Cancel
Yeah,
culture, mob. It's because everybody.
nobody's using their brains. It's all
Nobody's
emotion.
using their brain. But one of the things, I think, one of the qualities of people who've been in the military is they take action based on a sense of duty.
Yeah.
That's very different, and I think that's very praiseworthy. And I think that's part of, again, these preppers. It's, you're planning. You're taking action.
Well, I know a lot of military people myself, and most of them are preppers.
Yeah.
I mean, because they're trained to look at the worst possible scenario and prepare for it. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And I said earlier in the broadcast that that the whole whiteness thing was the communism of the 50s in the sense of the 20s in the sense of being chased down. But the objective difference, however, is that communism really did murder millions of people and continues to. This whiteness that they're going after is nothing like that at all. That's the difference. The similarity are the tactics. The difference are the specific object. Well, similarly, there'll be a reaction, as I say. But the reaction will, I'm sorry to say, be much more justified than the initial push. But being more justified is a danger in itself, if you see what I mean.
Right.
There's nothing more intoxicating than quote unquote righteous anger. Nothing makes you feel better, especially if you really have an objective reason to feel righteous about it. Antifa and these little twerps, they don't. Their blowback nemesis, they will.
Okay.
I don't like it. And, when I don't like something, you know what happens? Not much.
Oh, not much? Okay.
When I don't like something, not a lot happens except that I'm not happy. That's pretty much it.
Okay. I was just thinking of you flailing your arms.
Yeah, pretty much. Just flailing my hands ineffectually. I don't like it. I don't. And the world is like, yeah, so. No, you don't understand. I really don't like it. Yeah, and so what? But it's important to me. Yeah, but it isn't to us.
Right?
That's the position I'm in.
Question from William.
All right.
Charles, how would you define the West? I think of it as the most Christian civilization which was built on altar and throne, and I contend that America has never truly been a part of the West by the founders' design. I also contend it is long gone. I'd say it began with the baptism of Clovis and ended with the culmination of World War I. The meme that we are the barbarians living within the ruins of a superior civilization rings quite true for me. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'd say I agree with you to a degree, but you could look at it another way. If you've got a person who's riddled with cancer, he's still the person he was. It's just that he's riddled with cancer. Nothing is working. His various organs are shutting down. He'll probably die, but he's still himself. He just has this horrific cancer. So I would also say that the West didn't start with Clovis. It started at the Last Supper. And it hasn't ended. What has happened is that a large chunk of it has been transformed into something weird and strange, your barbarians in the ruins. But, today is the anniversary of the defeat of the Turks at the Battle of Vienna in 1683. And from time to time, the West looks almost completely overwhelmed. It certainly looked that way during the Iron Age of the papacy, the pornocracy, when the Muslims were keeping the Byzantines busy. Germany and Italy were in chaos, and the Holy See itself was in the gift of, for want of a better word, sluts. That was a very dark time. We came out of it. We may come out of this, or we may not. Hard to say. But just as, we like to think, we like to say that in 476, the Roman Empire in the West fell. Well, we say that because that was the last emperor in the West until Charlemagne. But the people who lived at the time didn't look at it that way. As far as they were concerned, there was one empire and two emperors, and now there's just one emperor. Again. So, as I say, I agree with you partly and partly not, but we'll see. The thing is to bear in mind that the West lives in the hearts and minds and arms of those of us who accept it, who claim it.
So the West started at the Last Supper.
Oh, you want me to unpack that to you?
I'm thinking about that. Is that an original take,
not that original?
Who initially?
I stole it.
Yeah.
I stole it from one of my professors here.
Was that original from him?
I've never heard it from anyone else.
Why the Last Supper? Why not, for example, Pentecost?
Well, the reason is very simple. At the Last Supper, Christ united the Davidic kingship, which he had inherited, with the communio of the church, which he invented. It was transubstantiation first occurred on Maundy Thursday. And as a result, it was not only the birth of the priesthood on Maundy Thursday, it was also the birthday of, you guessed it, Christian monarchy. And that is why the foot washing on Maundy Thursday traditionally was a huge ceremony at every Christian court. Because they keyed in on it. They realized that was their charter, so to speak. And the thing is, though, that the following day, Good Friday, you have the transubstantiation, and we call the first supper the Last Supper the first Mass. But the sacrificial aspect of the Last Supper only comes into play with the crucifixion. And then, of course, at Pentecost, they were already priests, but they received the Holy Ghost. I mean, those few days between Maundy Thursday and Pentecost, that was when the church was set up. And that's why we call Pentecost the birthday of the church, because that was the finishing touch, if you will. But with the birth of the church was the birth of the West.
All right. The question from Adrian. I recently bought copies of Charles's Puritan's Empire.
Yay!
And Star Spangled Crown.
Yay!
With free shipping on all orders over $25.
Void were prohibited. Hurry now while supplies last. Call in the next 10 minutes and you get Sir Sean Leslie's Ghost Book free. Operators are standing by. Not an actor. And that's not all.
Okay, I agree with everything that Charles just said, other than you get a free ghost book. Everything else is legit.
Well, no, that's what they call within the next 7 minutes.
Yeah, but you created an offer that actually isn't a real offer, so that's...
Well, no. Well, stop and think about this for a second. They'd have to call within the next 7 minutes while we're producing the show.
Right, okay, yeah. There you go. Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, to get the free ghost book, they've got to call the next 7 minutes.
Okay, I missed that.
You remember, that was how they always did the things. You know, they'd say, order now and you get this and such. Order in the next 10 minutes and you get, something else.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. In Puritan's Empire, I was happy to read the established orthodoxy when it came to the independents, the rebels against the king. Will Charles please discuss the historiography which led him to adopt this new view on independence?
Sure. I'd recommend a couple of books. One is called The King's Three Faces. And then the other is called, I forget the author, it's an Irish name. The other is called The Royalist Revolution by Eric Nelson. Basically, the one of the things I had not really realized before is how important to the colonists before 1763 the image of the king as their defender against Protestantism, against Catholicism, and against the French and Spanish was. Part of the shellacking his reputation took. And remember, they saw him as a mythic figure, not as a man, in a way that they didn't in Britain. Precisely, I suppose, because they were so far away. But one reason why the Quebec Act was so horrific for them was because their great defender against Protestantism and the French, against Catholicism and the French, was suddenly the patron of Catholicism and the French. So, but the thing is that the measures that brought the colonial leadership into conflict with Britain were all measures that went through Parliament. Now, bear in mind that with the partial exception of Georgia, every colony had been founded directly under the king. There was no room in the charters for Parliament doing anything. But the way that British government had evolved, it was in fact Parliament that set policy, or the government responsible to Parliament. So, a whole lot when the Stamp Act and things like that came in, there were a whole number of pamphlets produced by the proto-revolutionaries calling on the king to assume direct control of the colonies. But what that really meant, of course, was dealing with each assembly as he dealt with Parliament. That's what they really wanted. Nevertheless, they invoked the Stuarts and said that the king was king of South Carolina or king of Massachusetts without reference to Parliament at all. Now, asking the king to do that wasn't going to go anywhere because he had taken an oath to govern through and with Parliament. And he wasn't going to break that. So that's why. I do recommend them both books very, very highly. I can't say they revolutionized or turned over my view of the thing, but they certainly enriched it.
Right. The final question for today is from John.
All right.
I find the architecture of our age bleak and life-draining. Do you think architecture has been weaponized to demoralize us, or does it all boil down to effectivity and profit? Does Charles know of any active architects working to reintegrate beauty into our environment?
Yeah, well, the reason why you feel that way is because you're right. Okay, that's the first thing. Now, do I know of any architects who are working against it? I do. In South Bend, Indiana, there's Duncan Stroik. In Boston, Massachusetts, there's, what is his name? I can't think of his name, but the firm is Cram and Ferguson. Ralph Adams Cram's firm, which is still around and still doing really great work. But the primary fighter against this kind of thing is not American.
What is it?
It's not a what, but a who.
Okay.
The Prince of Wales.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you've talked about this before. Yeah.
I have. Charles, the Prince of Wales, has sponsored, backed, and funded all sorts of ventures to revive and protect traditional styles of architecture, traditional crafts, all this kind of stuff. Go to his website, you'll find a lot of leads.
Okay. Well, let's unpack this a little bit. So you agreed with John's feelings that the architecture of our age is bleak and life-draining.
That's because it's bleak and life-draining. That's the only reason I agree with it.
Right. But do you think there is actual intent behind this to weaponize and demoralize us?
Not in the sense of that being their major goal. But how do I put this? You know how some people are just toxic? You know how some people are just toxic. You know, if you're around them, you know something bad's going to happen. They breathe the life out of a room.
I don't associate with those people. In fact, I try to stay as far away from those people as possible.
Well, you can because you live in a gigantic tower and you're surrounded by gates and you can do that.
That's true.
However, for people in, shall we say, less fortunate circumstances, they have to put up with all kinds of people. And the fact is, let me put this another way. Let's say that you were a drunk.
Okay.
Right? You're a total drunk, and all you care about is boozing it up, gambling, having a good time for yourself. Eventually, Tumbler House would go broke.
Okay.
Now, that would not be your intent. But you're not a businessman, if that were the case. And you just being who you are would destroy the firm without your intending it to. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Just doing what comes naturally is toxic for you. I mean, it's not necessarily toxic to you, but it's toxic to the company. The company will go broke, but that's not your reason for doing what you do. Your reason is that you're stupid or whatever, and you're a slave to your addictions, whatever it may be. And as a byproduct of that, the company is going to go broke and everybody's going to be out of a job. But that was not your intent. You did not weaponize your means of management or mismanagement in this case. It worked that way because it worked that way, and that's the kind of person you are. Well, similarly, our elites are like that in the sense that what they favor and what they're into is bleak and life draining.
So, there are different objects that we're talking about here. For example, for residential homes, to me, I feel that profit dictates how it's run. So you come up with one creative design, and then you just do it for an entire neighborhood, right? And that way you save costs because everything is standardized. You have a template, and it's much more cost efficient to just cookie cutter it out and recreate the same house with slight variation, I guess, to appease people. And so that's just profit right there. It would take so much more money to come up with a different creative design for every single house.
Well, yeah, but you see, that's my point.
I'm not agreeing with that, by the way. I think
no, I realize, but that's my point. The very goal is to cookie cutter it to be as cheap as possible.
Well, see, that's what I'm trying to say here. There are different things to talk about because you have this where profit's a consideration, but where profit's not a consideration is still nevertheless this architecture still sucks. Like, obviously, for the Yellow Armadillo, the cathedral in Los Angeles, or the Crystal Cathedral, it's still terrible, even when that's profit's not the consideration.
It's terrible because it reflects who the man is. In the case of the Raj Mahal, Connor Mahoney said, "This is my spirit in stone." This is what I'm trying to tell you.
I've never heard that quote before.
Now you know. It's his spirit in stone. It reflects who he is.
Okay.
I mean, people. The thing you got to bear in mind about architecture is that it's the least democratic of the arts inherently. And the reason for that is that all the other arts, I don't care if it's painting or theater or writing or anything else, they're more or less dependent on the immediate users. But with architecture, for the most part, the people who live, work, worship, eat, or whatever in a place have no control over the architecture. It's in the hands of big government, big business, big religion, big whatever. And the architect is, if he can convince the moron in charge that his view is good, then the moron in charge will sign off on it, and there's no question that's what it's going to be. And to add insult to injury, if the moron in charge is sympathetic to this inhuman, bleak, and life-draining style, because he himself is bleak, inhuman, and life-draining.
Yeah.
But it's not weaponized in the sense that he's setting out to ruin the people who are going to be using the building. It's a byproduct of his personality.
Yeah. One of the interesting aspects of Los Angeles County is you can tell, looking at a house, you can tell when it was built.
Yeah.
You know? And the further out over in San Bernardino County you get more of this commercial, mass-produced home.
Tractorama.
It's gross to me. And you get these shopping centers, right? Everything is all
Yeah.
commercially organized. You get mass-produced homes, then these mass-produced shopping centers, and it's just gross to me.
And the shopping centers have all the same companies for the most part.
That too, yeah, all these big giant companies. Where the closer you get to Los Angeles, you still have these old remnants, right? And
Yeah.
I like that. I will also add one caveat to one exception to the new homes is I do kind of sometimes like the Asian mansions that are sprouting up, because what's happening over here in California is they knock down an old ranch home and they build a new sort of an Asian mansion, which is very luxurious and nice. And sometimes they are actually really nice.
They're the funny thing with them, they're kind of odd. The proportions are there's something strange about them, but they are pretty. I remember when they first started building them, the Arcadia City Council. Now remember, what they knocked down, replaced it with, are these old ranch homes, which there's not a lot you can say about them.
Right.
They're pretty nondescript. I mean, if you preserve one, you'll have preserved all of them.
Sure.
But the Arcadia City Council tried to pass a law against mini mansions in the name of protecting our rich architectural heritage in Arcadia. And I saw that. Now that was racism. It really was.
That actually is, yeah.
That you want racism? I mean, that move by the city council to ban mini mansions, they couldn't even bring themselves to say that's what they were doing. They were safeguarding Arcadia's rich architectural heritage. Okay, I don't know how to break the news. Post-war ranch houses are not rich architectural heritage. Save one. Hold on to one.
Now, my dad told me, I don't know if this is true, but that in terms of the Asian mansions, one of the things that they get status from is the doorway. Because sometimes some of them, they even have like a stained glass window above the doorway, and this big giant doorway area. Is that true? That's a sort of a status thing?
It is, and also there's the question of feng shui.
Yeah, I don't know the rules or the application of that.
Well, basically, you don't want to have too many straight paths, because if you do, the evil spirits will take a direct line in. So you want to put in a lot of curves and bends and so forth.
That makes it interesting.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I won't say who, but a mutual friend of ours, sister and brother-in-law, got a house really cheap in Arcadia because it had bad feng shui, and the Chinese wouldn't touch it.
Okay.
It's true. Well, it was a regular house built pre-war, and so it wasn't built for feng shui.
Ah, I see.
So, I mean, it wasn't built. We're going to build this with evil feng shui. No, it wasn't like that at all. It was just an old house, but that's why they got it so cheaply.
Let's talk some more about architecture, because I feel it's so important and it's so interesting. One of the things that's happening that I kind of like is there's a lot of development in Arcadia, a lot of new development, and in the area too. And it's sort of combining commercial, like a commercial entity at the bottom with the apartments on the top.
Which is an old deal.
I kind of like it. It's kind of almost an interdependent type thing. Like you have a relation, so it's creating a relationship between the homeowner and this business.
Well, I mean, it was the case in all the great cities on the Eastern Seaboard, and in San Francisco, you apartments over shops were very, very common.
Yeah.
And very often, of course, it was the shopkeeper himself who lived in the apartment over the shop, but not always. And sometimes sometimes the landlord would own the building and rent it out to people, residents on top and the store on the bottom. Sometimes somebody who lived in the place would rent out the commercial section. I have friends in New York City, and they own the building that they live in. Now it's an old building because their family's been there a while. The bottom floor is a wine business. It was originally the family business. They've sold it, but they still own the property. And then there are 4 stories above this, each with a couple of apartments, and they live in one of the apartments. And I always love going there because the apartment reminds me of the apartment of Ellery Queen in the old television series.
Yeah.
It is the quintessential New York in the 30s apartment. I see Ellery Queen, you'll see what I mean. Their apartment looks just like that. I love going there. But anyway, and you're right. That kind of thing did build a community. There are a lot, in addition to architecture, there are a lot of, what's the word I want? Efforts underway, campaigns underway, things like the new urbanism and all that, trying to recreate neighborhoods and so forth, things that we've lost not just in the cities, but really never had in the suburbs. The closest to you that's anything like that is Old Town Monrovia.
Yeah.
Right, because downtown Arcadia doesn't have that kind of a feel. Well, I mean, it's Huntington Drive,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Well, not just Huntington Drive, also, oh golly, Live Oak.
Yeah. Okay. So that'll do it for this episode. Any closing remarks, Charles?
You betcha. You bet. Not only is today in real time the feast of the Holy Name of Mary, but tomorrow is the exaltation of the Holy Cross, commemorating the retaking of the cross of the Persians. And September 29th, you know what's coming up.
September 29th? What is that?
Michaelmas.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Oh, and before I forget, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday of next week, this coming week, I should say, are the Ember Days in September. Your last Ember Days for the year. And wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more.
There is. Thursday, today being Saturday the 12th, so let's see, the 13th, the 14th is Monday, the Feast of the Holy Cross. 15th is Tuesday. So the 17th of September. Very important day for all you residents of the United States and their possessions.
What?
Constitution Day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And yesterday was 9/11.
Is it 20th or 19th anniversary? I think it's probably 19th. Yeah, 19th.
19th. Just think, less than 20 years, and that whole feeling of national unity and everybody waving the flag and all that is blown to smithereens. All gone, no more, bye-bye. But you remember what that was like when everybody was jumping up and down singing God Bless the USA? Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. 19 years. You were 3 years old.
What? I was in high school, buddy.
Yeah, I know. Look, if I can't tease you, who can? Oh, never mind. Anyway, but it's amazing when you consider that more than half your life has gone by so far since 9/11.
I know.
And you've seen everything go downhill. But, never mind. Better times are coming. Happy days are here again. You don't seem impressed.
I was thinking, because you said everything going downhill, but, I don't know. Thinking about personal development, spiritual development, and stuff like that.
Yeah, you've had a lot of advances, sure.
Yeah, I think
And
all of us, just in general,
yeah,
everyone watching this show, I think you should be grateful for the Catholic faith. That's one of the things associated with the first glorious mystery. You always say,
well,
thank you for my greatest gift of the Catholic faith.
indeed. And I'd like to point out that at 9/11, while everyone was waving the flag, we didn't have the motu proprio. We didn't have the Anglican Ordinariate.
Yeah.
It's been a mixed bag. I would say that developments, at least up until 2013, developments in the church were much better than developments in the state.
That's definitely true. 90s were a rough time for me.
Oh yeah. Well, they were a rough time in general. Poor President Clinton being persecuted. What? Well, look, what can I say except that all we can do is live in the time and place we find ourselves in. If I make it back for Christmas, then we'll be able to hawk a whole bunch of side books. If I don't, then we won't.
Okay.
Pray that things are sane enough for me to come home. And one other important point before we leave. Be sure to pray very, very hard between now and November 3rd for the United States. The election is coming up, and our country needs a lot of prayer right now.
I think everybody's everybody was praying hard with the last election. I remember I was talking with a mutual friend, Craig, from a local parish, and he said, how could Trump not win? Everyone was just praying so hard. Because
doing it more so now.
We forget how well. Maybe you predicted Trump would win. I forgot.
I did.
Yeah, you did. But to me, Hillary was an inevitability on the landscape. It was like this giant evil boss, that was just looming in the distance. This monster looming in the distance that we knew we were going to eventually tangle with. And somehow we were
spared.
Imagine if Hillary, we forget this. Imagine if Hillary was president during this.
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine that?
It wouldn't be working quite like this. We'd all be in camps, but don't say that. Oh. And, we'll see what would President Harris be like,
So, I mean, that's something to be grateful for, that Hillary, I find myself thinking that a lot, actually.
Yeah, with good reason. So, it's not all doom and gloom, ladies and gentlemen. And you know what else? We can sign off on this happy note.
What?
It's not just the election that's coming up.
It's your birthday.
Well, that's true, too. I will be 60. But I was thinking more of Halloween and Thanksgiving and Christmas. I mean, we're getting into that season, ladies and gentlemen. And even if, for whatever reason, you're not in a position to really celebrate them as you did, remember that all the Christmases and Thanksgivings and Halloweens, etc., that ever you celebrated are still alive in your head. There'll be more to come later. And as far as Christmas goes, its mystery is always true and always now and always present. So be of good cheer, ladies and gentlemen. All that matters is that we save our souls. Everything else, it's the passing scene against which we have to work that out. So I have a question for you.
Okay.
Now, this is purely hypothetical.
Okay.
But what if this were Monday?
Then it would be off the menu.
Oh, yeah? Well, what if you saved a soul?
It might be your own.
God bless you all, ladies and gentlemen. Take care.